Today I will be discussing American Sign Language. So what ASL basically is, it's its own language with its own grammar system and everything, but a lot of people think that it is directly related to English, but it is not. English is just used to translate the rough meaning of American Sign Language. But American Sign Language is actually based on French Sign Language. And also what your signs are and how you speak and what your alphabet is all different depending on the region that you live in the world. So American Sign Language, we do use an alphabet based on English. That is the only correlation, that it's, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Obviously it's gonna be the same thing, but the alphabet from other regions, even some use two hands, some use way different signs than we do. It just really depends on your region. So an overview of ASL in itself is, it is signs made by moving the hands with facial expressions as well as postures of the body. So the way that you communicate emotion and different meanings of a word is based on context. So it's based on what you're talking about, it's based on what the situation is really, and it's based on maybe the conversation between two people. So postures of the body mean it makes a big difference if you are using signs and have one shoulder down and have one shoulder up. It just means different things depending on the sign, and then as well as the facial expressions. So earlier when I said today we'll be discussing ASL, I scratched my eyebrows when I said what. So what I actually said, word for word translation, was today I will be discussing what? American Sign Language. So that's a rhetorical question in the language, and you sort of are asking yourself, it's a whole, you know, I can't put it into a 5-minute video, but it's just a whole different grammar system that is very, very different from English, very different. So the difference between ASL and English, like what sets us apart, I know we know the first thing that makes a microculture different from the dominant culture, and that is a physical or cultural trait. And of course we have different cultural norms, like when two people are talking, it's okay to walk between them if they're signing to each other. Well, not talking, signing to each other. It's okay to walk right between them. It's not considered rude. So that is a big difference between English and ASL culturally, is that a lot of things that are seen as rude are seen as okay in sign language. And of course, the other physical trait is using the hands to communicate. Way different. When I started learning it, it was a way new concept to me. I didn't understand that you would use your hands to talk to someone. I had always seen it and I was like, they're talking really, really fast. I can't really understand what's going on. But now I understand a little bit more, taking a year in high school and then taking a year at RV. So the dominant culture is English, of course, we all know that, in America. And so the grammar and structure are completely unrelated to English. So I have never heard of anyone in English going, you go where? The supermarket. English, I don't think we've ever heard of anyone talking like that, but in ASL, that is the way that you would say you are going to the supermarket. Or you are going where? So you're going where is where are you going? It's a complete different structure of words, but that's what differentiates it from English so much, is that it's a whole new grammar system to be learned by whoever is learning that language. So the only borrowed items that differentiate, well, not really differentiate, but bring ASL and English together are the alphabet. So it goes A, B, C, and then so on. But you fingerspell words sometimes. So if you're fingerspelling a street sign or you're fingerspelling someone's name, you know, that there is that constant use of English in ASL, in which the alphabet is directly borrowed from English for ASL. So ASL has a lot of different patterns of communication. So it has sign variations based on region. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I know that us using American Sign Language is completely different from people using British Sign Language. So for example, British Sign Language uses two hands for the alphabet, which I could never learn because it was so difficult and so different. But there are signed variations. There could be a word said in America using a sign, and that same word in a different country will have a completely different sign. because of the way that the language has evolved and traveled from country to country, it changes within the culture and within the people. So once you learn ASL fluently, you can kind of see the variations and still understand it. But when you are new to the idea of sign language and to the idea of the culture and the history behind sign language, it's very difficult to understand variations. So there are actually 3 different types of sign language when we're talking about ASL, and so there's basically a range. On one end you have ASL, which is completely signing and finger spelling. You are using complete ASL grammar in what I was referring to earlier with questions and statements and everything and rhetorical questions. And then in the middle is PSC, which means Pidgin Sign Language, which is sort of a morph of ASL and English together. So you have a little bit more English words within your signs. You have directly translated English words. So it's almost like my name is, so they sometimes spell out words and everything. And then even more than that, there is signed exact English, which is on this end of the range. So signed exact English is basically, there is a sign for every single word in English. So it's not really ASL, it's English, but using signs. The grammar is exactly like English. It uses, like, if you say I, you're gonna point to yourself, or if you say from, you would use a sign. But let's say you use is, at, the, those all don't exist in ASL. Those aren't words that we consider. Those are just sort of skipped over that we don't really need a sign for. But in signed exact English, there's a sign for everything, or you finger spell the words in between. It's a lot more information, it's a lot more signing, a lot more work, and a lot more to sort of receive when you're trying to understand someone speak. So some interesting facts about ASL are, after English and Spanish, ASL is the 3rd most used language in the US, and it is very popular among young people to learn because it's not a language that a lot of people know in general in America. And of course we know that RV is featuring actually classes in ASL, which is so great, which I love. I think it's a very good language. It's not a completely difficult language to learn. It's just the understanding of the grammar and learning of a new language system that becomes a little bit difficult, but it's very rewarding. So number 2, one sign in sign language can have multiple meanings, which sort of refers to context. ASL is a very, 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 very contextual language, and everything that you talk about is based on your situation or based on the people between you, the people you're talking to. So when you use a sign, it's multiple meanings, which, like, if you're in a certain context with someone, I can't think of one off the top of my head because I haven't done sign language in school in a while, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. But if you use a certain if you use a certain sign based on the context of that situation, it can have different meanings depending on what you're talking about. Number 3, the alphabet in ASL uses 1 hand. British and German uses 2 hands, which I said earlier. It's a very evolved language between regions, and there's a lot of different little aspects that change, which makes it really unique to the country and brings a sort of uniqueness to the whole language. Number 4, the sign for I love you contains the letters I, L, and Y. So the sign for I love you is probably the most known sign that everybody uses, whether they're hearing, hard of hearing, or deaf. So it looks like this. So what it says is I, that's I in sign language, L, that's L, and then Y. So it sort of combines I love you, and yeah, a lot of people don't even know that. They just don't know why the sign looks like this. Number 5, ASL has been used in the US for over 200 years. So if you guys have ever heard of Martha's Vineyard, that is where the sign language and deaf people have a lot of history, is because Martha's Vineyard was a very majorly deaf place. And people aren't aware that deaf history goes on and on, way back into our history, even in America. Back to schools and back to speech therapy and all of that. Today we just talked about how the grammar is different and how sign language can be very rewarding but very difficult to learn sometimes because you are learning a whole new grammar system. So there also is a range when we're talking about sign language, and it goes from ASL, PSC, and S-E-E. If you ever have a chance, definitely go learn some signs, learn basic conversation skills. It's very rewarding to see the look on their face when they know that they can speak in their own language and not have to talk or not have to write anything down. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.